This video serves as a means to explain the relationship between humanity and the supernatural, and my own theory as to how the two interact. The supernatural is extrasensory, requiring more than the default senses to perceive. The brain has to be properly stimulated in order to actually perceive these supernatural entities. Most stories of the supernatural usually begin with a person feeling a sense of either A, being watched, B, a sense of not being by themselves, things feeling out of place. Time slowing down is a big one. Well, lately there's been a lot of stories of people smelling a scent of copper, like old blood, rotting carcasses, that kind of stuff, also before a supernatural encounter occurs. It is in those moments right before the encounter begins where I believe the brain is properly stimulated enough that it can actually perceive the supernatural. From here, I believe that there are different tiers that you can achieve in terms of how stimulated your brain is in these encounters. I believe there are 4 separate tiers to these encounters, and specifically to, if you want to say, ramp up the encounter, I suppose you could say. Now these 4 tiers, what's going on behind the scenes is that the pineal gland inside of the brain is sending out some kind of chemical. This chemical stimulates the brain, and the more stimulated the brain is, the greater the person's ability to perceive the supernatural. That said, these tiers start off at tier 0, which is you can't see them, but the supernatural entities can see you. I believe this is the default. This is the state that everybody is always in. Tier 1 would be the sensation that you're being watched. The sixth sense, if you will, that you know somebody's looking at you and you've got the attention of something or somebody. This isn't a strictly supernatural sensation. Now, tier 2 is where the brain begins to get properly stimulated. Tier 2 is when you know you're being watched, and you can actually even see the non-human entity, or at least you can see bits of it. Imagine seeing something like a shadow person, say. It's a vague silhouette, or in some cases you can see them, but it's almost like they're a low resolution image or something. Details are very foggy. Now, it's difficult for a regular human to increase their brain stimulation from this point onwards, but there are ways to do it. The ones that immediately jump to mind for me would be something like throwing in ritual, candles, incense, and all that shit, because that's gonna hype up your brain and that's gonna get you into it. That's the reason that a lot of Wiccans and other practitioners of that shit do it. Or you can do the modern approach, in this case doing copious amounts of drugs, hallucinogenics especially. Different drugs, of course, have different effects on the human body. Some will get you to the point of a near-death experience, in which case, well, your brain's gonna be pretty amped up because you're literally dying. Others are gonna do it by just throwing your body into overdrive. See something like bath salts for that. A little tangent here. There's a relatively new drug circulating around. I believe it was circulating around the Southwest, I wish to say. It had the name of the Great Death, and it's so lethal it can kill you with a single touch. One police officer was confiscating the Great Death, and he was wearing gloves at the time, and he got high while wearing gloves because it went through his skin. It went through the gloves and his skin. Holy crap. I digress. Anyway, you've stimulated your brain enough either by wacky candle magic or by drugs, or by the Grey Death. So now your brain is stimulated enough to reach the next tier, tier 3. This is where you can completely see the supernatural entity and it can see you. There's no vagueness, there's no fogginess. Both of you can make out each other's horrific and disgusting forms in complete detail. And to a lesser extent, your other senses have caught up as well. It's not just sight anymore. And now we get to the last tier, Tier 4. Sight is established between both parties, and both parties can physically interact with each other. This one is pretty goddamn horrifying when you think about it. And it gives some rather disturbing implications. Now, the biggest problem with something like Tier 4 is obviously the fact, now that you've reached it, now that you can sense it, well, that means Bigfoot can rip you apart limb by limb. And on the plus side, you can now try to punch Bigfoot. Now, back to the subject of the brain stimulation, the pineal gland specifically. I think it's the pineal gland specifically because the pineal gland is in charge of dosing out brain chemicals and whatnot, especially for sleeping. And a lot of supernatural stuff occurs underneath good old dark sky. Nighttime, when a person should be sleeping but for whatever reason isn't sleeping, probably because they're stupid. Mediocre comedy attempts aside, the pineal gland is definitely one of the most mysterious of the brain's functions. I mean, seriously, the thing is the size of a small pea pod. It's tiny, and yet its importance can really not be understated. Oh, I suppose I should probably talk about de-stimulating the brain too, to de-escalate tears. I believe a person can properly de-stimulate their brain in terms of supernatural sensibilities by honestly just kind of ignoring it. If you're not at something like Tier 3, you can probably just grab a book, sit down, read the book, watch a movie, play a game, honestly kind of just do anything. If your brain is not properly stimulated enough to establish physical contact between you and the supernatural entity, you really shouldn't have anything to fear. Unless you were a retard and decided to break out the candles, in which case you probably gained the attraction of things that something like an energy vampire can interact with you, not in a physical manner, but can still interact with you nonetheless, even if your brain is not properly stimulated enough to actually sense it. In fact, that's kind of what they excel at. You cannot sense them, but they can sense your energy at the very least. Probably more than that. Effectively, what I'm saying is that not every single creature can creatively fit into the tier list we went through earlier. Some of the supernatural entities exist outside of that. It's like really any other kind of environment. You'll have things which can conveniently fit into the rubric you prescribed to them, and there's other things which exist outside of that. Now, a few last notes which I can't really find anywhere to fit conveniently into the rest of this video. Firstly, brain stimulation can be, well, one hell of a ride, put simply. It can either happen within the span of a minute, or over a few long, drawn-out hours. Imagine it like this. You can either be in a flee or fight encounter where you are physically fighting for your life, or alternatively, you can be lounging on the couch, binging, really, the Conjuring franchise, in which case you have very, very poor taste. However, even if it is a very poor franchise, you are still subjecting yourself to potentially terrifying material that's going to end up stimulating your brain and putting you onto the tier list further. Now, with all of that said, this video has hopefully been educational to people and taught them a few things that they wouldn't have known otherwise. Whether that be about the wonders of the pineal gland, how mediocre scientists are at actually figuring out secrets that are literally right in front of them, or how Bigfoot may, or may not, be able to one day eat you in the wilderness because your brain got stimulated, or alternatively, the fact I cannot say pineal gland correctly.